Hey guys, welcome to Nomads Nation Podcast, episode 20. We've been on a bit of a hiatus, but we're coming back with a bang, and I'm excited to have Nick from Alpkit. Now, if you don't know who Alpkit is, I didn't either, actually, until about, 2 or 3 months ago. And the reason I found out about Alpkit is because our beloved carry brand Trakke went out of business, and then they were like revitalized, and the brand behind that purchase was Alpkit, and that sent me down a rabbit hole. And I reached out to Alpkit, and I ended up meeting Nick, and I just wanted to bring him on to kind of talk about like what happened and what we can expect from Trakke moving forward. And so Nick, thanks so much for jumping on the pod.
Well, hi, good to meet you.
Awesome to meet as well. Actually, we had a conversation a couple weeks ago to kind of prep for this, and in that conversation, it was really cool because you're like an OG backpack guy. Like you lived in Hong Kong before. I'm coming from Hong Kong.
Absolutely.
So I want to keep this conversation concise, but maybe we can jump into like, I don't know, what it's like to have been in the backpack game for as long as you have been. That could be really cool to double click into. But first things first, like I think, we want to get into the Trakke stuff because there's so much interesting conversation there. But real fast, like just some backstory for anybody who doesn't know about Alpkit, what you guys, your history, where you guys came from. Tell me about the Alpkit story.
Sure. Pretty simple, but it starts way back. So we started 22 years ago. But the kind of story starts with essentially 4 friends getting to know each other, really into the outdoors, climbing, biking, canoeing, and all having our own careers, whether that's in marketing, whether that's in graphic design, photography, or kind of product design and kind of textiles and stuff, which is my background. And I suppose through a working career, we've all felt kind of, I wish I could do something by myself. Like what is that? I think a lot of people, a lot of your viewers will kind of be thinking, oh, wouldn't it be cool to start something? And that's all we did. We literally just thought, right, okay, we've got an idea for an outdoor brand. Spend time thinking about names because you can disproportionately spend a lot of time thinking about names rather than product. But it was as simple as that. We thought, right, okay, we'll give it a go. That meant, mortgaging houses, trying to get a bit of finance to get going. But we started in a really small industrial unit, the size of a squash court, getting literally a container's worth of mats at that point, stuffing it in, all the kind of, the kind of early start off you'd expect with kind of most brands that kind of start, and all the kind of trials and tribulations. And I suppose what the key thing that makes Alpkit is that we never felt that we were going to be a like mountaineering brand, or we're going to be climbing, or we're going to be bike. We were an outdoor brand. And I think that now that encapsulates what we do, like everybody is, we do a bit of travel, we do a bit of, biking, we do a bit of walking. So we've really been able to tap into that a whole market because I think that's what the kind of modern outdoory travel person does. They do a lot. They might go on, a flight to Montenegro, but they'll go hiking in the mountains. So they want a bit of outdoor gear, but they also want, kind of luggage to go along with that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been the success because we've got a really broad product range. And the other thing, I suppose, what we've always tried to do is just service, just human. We just treat people like we want to be treated. Really simple stuff. Sustainability has been really important to us, and everything about that, whether that's diversity in the outdoors, whether that's about ownership of companies where we get stuff made, obviously all the other stuff about great choice of fabrics that reduce impact, all those kind of stuff. So we've always felt we're quite a rounded business, and customers seem to like that. We just I was at an event a couple of nights ago, and someone said, I bought your head torch 20 years ago. And like that's so amazing, the fact that we've got that longevity of the kind of customer base. That's been really a part and parcel of the kind of Alpkit story.
Remind me, does Alpkit produce in the UK or manufacture in the UK, or did you at one point? Or
I spent my early part of the career, which I guess we might talk about later, moving things from the UK to China.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spent probably the last 10 years with Alpkit trying to move stuff from Asia back to Europe and the UK. Mm-hmm. So we have 10 people here making...
Where's here? Where's here?
So here is basically, we're just north of Nottingham in England. So if you were to pick an English map, It'd be bang in the middle. So we're just on the edge of the Peak District, which is one of the national parks. And so we've got 10 seamsters who actually make the bags. I've got a few behind me. We also assemble bikes in the UK. So although the parts and most of the parts, Shimano, SRAM are made in Asia frames, we actually put the bikes together in the UK. So we can check quality, we can build the bikes to our specification, and more importantly, we can put the right components on that our customers want. So every bike is subtly different. So fundamentally, we're making about roughly, because it's obviously the added value of making products in the UK, about 30% of our turnover is UK made. So we've always had a strong heritage in knowing how to build products. We started our factory probably 15 years ago, which might only been 2 or 3 people, but I was making boulder mats, a few bags and things. But that gives you a really good understanding about how a bag is made. I mean, that. Like when you go to the factories and you can see stuff being made and the cutting, that gives you a much deeper understanding of how products are made, which helps both products that we make here and then products that we work with our partners out in Asia as well.
I'm kind of curious. So we're going to get to the track stuff in a second, but just when it comes to, and this kind of ties into that, is when it comes to making bags in the UK. So I've been to some Vietnam factories, but I've been to a crap ton. I'm sorry, I've been to some China factories, but I've been to a crap ton of Vietnam factories, right?
Yeah.
And there's such a culture in Vietnam and China for learning how to sew and making backpacks and apparel, right? What is it like in the UK then? Like, is it like so hard to find a seamstress or somebody who can sew? Do you train them in-house? Do you move somebody from the other side of the world? Like, I've always wondered about that because, you can find hobbyist sewers, but like in the States, at least where I'm from, like I don't meet a lot of people who are professional sewers. So how does that work from a business perspective?
There's no doubt that we've got a skills shortage of people that are able to sew, people that are interested in to sew in terms of the actual numbers. But I think what we found really interesting, we've probably got a few sort of different cohorts of kind of people and seamsters that kind of that are part of our team. We've definitely got kind of certainly in our kind of repair stations where people have an interest in sewing. Hobbyists is sort of slightly kind of they're really interested in the sort of technical side of putting stuff together, but it might be stuff that they've done at home. But they're quite they're still really interested in how to repair gear and things like that. And definitely we've been successful in our repair stations, which we've got in 8 of our stores, where people have gone, I've had no formal training, but I'm actually pretty good at just putting stuff back together. And that's definitely one part. And we've, there's been, on occasion, we've had some of those joining our factory. A lot of the factory are machinists that have been in the industry 20, 30 years. And that was probably from, the sort of legacy of we were seeing the decline of UK manufacturing. And certainly where we are, we've had a big upholstery background. So Leicester, Nottingham, Derby have had some really big, furniture manufacturers. So we've got people that are used to having, like heavy materials and putting that together, which is really important because typically on the backpack, there's a physicality of trying to put a bag together as well.
But you got to wrestle that thing. Sometimes. You got to make that bag your bitch.
Indeed. And you've also got people that perhaps have been more on the clothing side, with like lingerie that have a little bit of a transition because they're used to some more delicate fabrics, but they've got, decades of skill there, and that's been amazing. And that's probably 60-70% of the people that work with us, and that's over the years. There's been I don't know, maybe in total over the years probably 60 people that have kind of come through and then gone on to do other things and stuff. But what we've also found is that we've had a kind of younger generation that maybe come straight from college. And they kind of haven't really known exactly what to go for. They're really interested in textiles. They're really interested. They might have done a fashion degree course, something like that. But they also want to learn, like properly learn what's it like in terms of the factory and kind of the machining skills. And I think on occasion they kind of they don't realise the value of it. They're kind of like, oh, I'll just get a job. I'll learn someone. I'm coming out of college. I'll get a job. That'll be okay. And I think I've always had a conversation with them to say this is literally one of the best things you can do. This is a skill set that whatever job that you've got later is a real, is a real skill to have. And if I think about, we've got our friends, competitors, companies that are around us, and there's a few people that have worked for Alpkit. The skills that they picked up here in the factory, both in the kind of development side and the kind of management side, but mostly the skills of putting a backpack together and knowing how that fitted. That's what got them the role, and that's also helping them excel at that role as well, because you just know how things go together, which is very different from getting on Illustrator, drawing and it's basically you just let someone else solve the problem. So I'm a great believer in that younger generation that have come to us and gone, I can learn stuff. And it's been great to see, where you've got someone in their early 20s having a manufacturing job, which today's society kind of like, it's almost a little bit odds. But I think that gives them a really, really solid foundation for the future.
It is a really fascinating conversation, because I remember years back I was talking, or maybe I just read this online, but it was a US backpack factory, and they said something similar to what you were saying, where a lot of their workers are the older generation, or let's say in their 40s, 50s, and they said basically on the lines of, in 20 years we're screwed because nobody's going to be able to take over these jobs, right? But in essence, what you're saying is that you're starting to see a little bit of a change of that, and also I see the pitch then, right? Less supply, more demand. And especially on the development side, right? I mean, when you start learning about products, especially soft goods, because they're so complicated and so beautiful, and learning the development side of it, it really opens an entire new world of possibilities. You understand construction, you understand development, you understand the engineering behind it. So I think that's really interesting. But what about, for me though, there's a difference potentially about for lack of a better word, the glamorous side of development, sitting in a studio and versus sitting at a fucking sewing machine trying to put out as many bags as you can in a 9-hour, shift. How does that work from that perspective? Because, again, having spent so much time in factories in Vietnam, the conditions of the factories that I went to are really fantastic. Vietnam, it's growing so fast, it's modernizing so fast, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's hard fucking work. It's not a walk in the park. They're in there and they're sewing, and they have KPIs to hit. And, so how does that work when it comes to, okay, cool, we're teaching you this construction and how to put soft goods together, but now it's also hey, we got orders, so let's get cranking.
I think for the most part, they understand that. So I think if someone's on the sewing line, then they're doing, 7.5, 8 hours of sewing. I think there's a slightly different sort of pace to it, if I'm honest. If you were to go to 8, you'd see something a little bit more repetitive. And I think we have to make allowances for that in the UK. I think if we had quite the same mentality, I think it would be a struggle. People were there going, this is not really what I signed up for. So some of the construction methods that we use here, where someone might take the whole bag and rather than splitting each of the operations apart, we lose a little bit of efficiency, but you also gain ownership in someone making a bag. And it's a slightly different that when you're, if you're just sewing a shoulder panel and you're doing one operation and then just doing that repetitively, that's slightly different than essentially making a backpack over a few days. I'll do some shoulder straps one day, then I'm going to do the back panel, then I'm going to do the lid, and then on Thursday, Friday, oh my God, I've made a bag. And I think that kind of sense of ownership really helps with quality, and also helps with, there's a sort of, I suppose, there's sort of a feeling that you've kind of completed something, whereas when it's just, I made 200 shoulder straps, you're going to have a slightly different feel. So I think we do have to tailor it to the UK, but there's still, we have to make so many bags in certain time. It's all about the time management and how much labor cost generally goes into a bag. And I suppose what we have to be is we just need to make sure that the cost of making the bag in terms of labor is still acceptable to the consumer. And I think, most of the backpack manufacturers have really proven that people really value the human energy that goes into making a product, and realize that where those products get made might have an impact on the cost. I think people, that's great. Everyone here, I think realizes that that's okay. I can buy up for that. And if I don't need it, there are lots of bag manufacturers that make great quality bags with a different labor cost, and they might be $100 cheaper.
I think it's a very mature market in that sense. We have the cheapest of the cheap to the handmade in Scotland and sort of everything in between, right? So, but I just want to kind of double click on what we were chatting about in regards to having the bags being made in your own factory, because having just started to dip my toes into this world of having a bag brand, let's say I don't have a bag that I can sell right now and I want to sell it on my website.
Yeah.
I basically got almost a 6-month process between putting that money down and everything that happens to actually being able to sell that on my website, right? From deposit to materials being ordered, to getting the slot in the factory, to doing the run, to storing it, to finding a freight ship, to getting it freighted over. A warehouse has to organize everything, and boom, 180 days later, I can finally start selling these bags and recuperating all those costs. Producing yourself with your own squad, though, like it is, for lack of a better, it's blitzkrieg in comparison. Like, it's lightning, so I would just love to hear, like, how does that work? Like, are you guys, well, first of all, do you enjoy the advantages of that?
Yep.
And part two is that, is it as easy as, are you keeping stock? Are bags made to order? Like, I just love to hear about, like, how that process works for the bags that you're making in the UK.
So we know both of those models really well. Alpkit is 90% of what we do over time has been where we've made products in Asia, and it's months until you spend, you all that money is up front, but it's months until you then get it back, until you sell to the consumer. And that does put a huge financial pressure on the business model, particularly kind of, D2C models. The advantage of making in the UK, which I think people forget, is that when you just think about stock turn, and essentially the kind of cash cycle, is that almost straight away, I mean, literally we could, so we've got, we can talk about product a little bit later, sort of the future, but we've gone into the back catalogue, and there's a pack that we've looked at, and realistically we've done a few samples. It's a quite simple backpack, but but realistically, if we'd have wanted to, and this is just the pay, if we'd have wanted to, we could have done a couple of days development, cut the fabric, started making it that week and having it available for sale the week after. So if we wanted to, we could really put, now, me putting like, let's do this just creates headaches for everyone else. So you have to be, let's plan it properly. So let's get the development cycle correctly. Let's get the cutting correct. Let's make sure everyone's aligned. But that process is so much shorter. So in terms of manufacturing, we look out maybe kind of 8 weeks in terms of, this is kind of what we're probably going to make. But what we're trying to do is essentially just have enough inventory that we can fulfill every set. And every day's a learning. I mean, we're not perfect at this, but we're close. So we've got products essentially where we said, this is what we need to make this week. They got cut on Friday and Monday, Friday of last week, Monday of this week. They were straight on the sewing line and essentially ready for sale at the end of the week. And they'll go on the website normally like Thursday night or Friday. So it's a very immediate process that if we've made it, it goes on sale. And that means really that the inventory we might have 2 or 3 weeks worth of inventory in terms of fabrics and buckles and things like that. So it's quite slick, and most of the fabrics and products that we're ordering are either UK or like the Austria Alpine buckles, obviously made in Austria. But there's a few other components, we tool from Vietnam and things. So there's a mix of products, but our inventory realistically is so much lower. Not just on, because that's just essentially material inventory. We're just making, we're making batches of product that if we'd have had to go to Asia, they'd have been after 300, 400, 500 pieces, depending on the price bakes. So you've got to buy so many more. So and that on day one is also the scary bit, because we can essentially make absolutely to demand. But if you're buying 500, you've got to be pretty sure you're going to sell 500. Otherwise, you've got 400 sitting in the warehouse. So the flexibility of that inventory, and certainly with the higher priced items, is, I think, a distinct advantage. So even though when we're looking at pricing and margin, people would think, why make anything in the UK? This is crazy. Why are you doing that? When you actually have the nuts and bolts of, just stock turn figures, and, you can use a slightly lower margin, the cash cycle so much shorter, then it makes commercial sense.
Absolutely. I mean, just to clarify for anybody who might be listening but's confused, I mean, if you're ordering from a factory in, Vietnam or China, Philippines, where most of the bags are made these days, you have an MOQ, minimum order quantity. And that allows the factory to say, hey, this is the smallest quantity we can allow you to order for us to be efficient and ensure that we're maintaining our own margins, because the factory is based on efficiency, right?
Absolutely.
It's all about how fast they can do things. So if you want to buy an expensive bag, you got to order 500 that minimum. And if you don't know if you're going to sell them, then you might sell 50 and you're sitting with 450 in your hand. You put that cash up. So this is where the building in the UK business model makes sense. But also, it's not easy either, because I'd love to, transition into the Trakke story at this point.
Sure.
You have Trakke, a brand who did that, right? And it's so interesting because Trakke is a brand that's always been near and dear to my heart, even though I've never actually touched or used one of their bags until recently. You guys sent me the Bannock, Bannock, the Bannock Pro recently, and I got to use that for a week. We just shot our review, and it was but even though I haven't used your bags, I've just been so in love with the aesthetic and the story and the fabrics that you guys use and everything. And the story of Trakke was handmade in Scotland in these smaller batches, right? And then I think it was maybe 8 or 9 months ago at this point. I can't recall.
April. I mean, the April the 30th is when we took it on. Sorry, March the 30th. So like Easter time last year.
So that's when you took it back on. Okay, so when did they go under?
I think it was probably just after Christmas that I think it was kind of like, okay, this is going to get a little bit hard, and I think that's when they had the sale. They kind of had the final sale, and then probably maybe like end of February, I think it was sort of officially announced that it was going to sort of close in Scotland.
I said in the intro like 2 or 3 months ago, time flies. It was we're almost at a year. But in essence, I woke up one day and, this Reddit was going, many baggers on Reddit was going crazy about, losing Trakke. And then, it seemed like we had lost one of these brands. And then, shortly after that, there was the announcement that they were saved. That brought me down the rabbit hole. Alpkit, here we are now. So I'd love to hear that story of, how you guys ended up partnering or you're working with Trakke in this sense. And how did that end up coming to be?
So we can go back in time, because certainly probably 16, 15 years ago, we kind of met up with Alec and then James, who I think was also one of kind of like the original kind of startups.
And Alec and James, these founders of Trakke?
And at that point, I can remember, the conversations were around, were we thinking of starting luggage, what we would do. And at that point, we just started our own factory making boulder mats. So just seeing something like, if you get a machine and you get some fabric, you get some thread, and you get someone that can sew, you can make a bag. So some of it is just dispelling it. It's not that difficult. All the difficulties come later, but day one, we can make bags. And I suppose also because we were in our early stages then, you can just see what that next step might look like. Okay, it's got a place. Oh, it's got some cool posters on the wall. Okay, they can, and it's at that point, there's probably only 4 of us working. They're just Alpkit's original founders. So it probably looked a little bit cooler, and like, okay, we want to start Trakke. So it was really nice just to have that in mind. And I've probably met Alec a couple of times over the years, and it's always with that kind of sort of memory of just that kind of early startups and things like that. And then we heard that Trakke were in difficulty probably late 2024. I think that's when it was kind of, and again, as a owner, founder at that stage, I can imagine it's quite difficult. And I think probably when for Alec, it was probably a little bit kind of like, oh, I've got to find a solution for this, and that would probably weighed very heavy. Hopefully I'm not speaking for him, but I know how that might feel. And we then got in touch and said, okay, we're interested. And obviously at that point, you kind of, you're trying to figure out a deal, what that could be. And I think it was pretty clear at that stage that the factory had to close. There was no option there. The lease was up. They were essentially was going to move from that property no matter what. So everything had to go. And Alec had already been in the process of, having to let the staff go, which I'm sure was, very sad and very, emotional for that. And we came in at this late stages and said, well, okay, we're really interested in this, because I think for two things. One, we didn't see as a challenge to take on the brand. The others was the concept of UK manufacturing isn't alien to us, so that's relatively easy to absorb for us, and I think was part of the story of Trakke. So, when you're buying the brand, there's no point not buying something that I think is integral to what the brand could be. And essentially, we carved out a thing saying, okay, we'll buy the brand, we'll buy all the machinery, we'll buy all the fabric, because what we wanted to do is, well, how do we just start? Literally, we need to make bags. This isn't a project we're going to shelve and a year later, like, oh yeah, we've launched it. It was like, just how do we do what Trakke were doing as soon as possible? Always easier to say than do. We had to. We moved even on day one. I went up with our ops manager, even just to take the entire Scottish factory and to get it on a truck and load it here. The volume of stuff we got wrong by 100%. So literally went, this isn't going to fit on our truck. We need 2 trucks. And even that, it was all literally out almost outside on the pavement. Like, we've got it. We've got 2 days or 1 day to solve this, and we managed it. It's all here. And again, that was a very emotional day. That was Alec there helping with the 1 or 2 that were left from Trakke. But I think there was a sense that we would do our absolute best for the brand. So I think hopefully that gave them a degree of comfort that to say, okay, we're going to try, we're going to continue to make in the UK. We're going to, so although we couldn't take the original team with us, that was just, we would try and honour everything that Alec had been brought up with the brand, and we'll do our best with that. And essentially, from week 2, week 1, we were starting making bags and getting those for sale on the website. So it was a relatively quick process. I think we'd hoped we'd probably done a little bit more. It's a year now into it, but we're very happy just doing what Trakke were doing. We're making the bags. Quality has been really important. And there was it's kind of bizarre now, but almost the only thing that we had, which we were kind of like unsure about, is all the bags had "Made in Scotland" written on them. They were really proud of that Scottish heritage, and that's something that we couldn't say. And that was one of our biggest reservations. Is that going to matter? And actually, we've been really, I think what mattered to people, that they were made in the UK, or just at least made, locally. And I think that's mattered more. So we've had very little conversations about, it's not made in Scotland. But as kind of a side story, Rowan, who was one of the original team at Trakke, then started her own manufacturing business called Point Manufacturing. So I think she's probably got, maybe 3 or 4 on the team, and they now make some of the bags in Scotland. We basically cut all the material, send her the components, and they make the bag. So we've even been able to keep some of the bags made in Scotland. So if you get a bag now from us and it says "Made in Scotland," it was made in Scotland. We're really careful with the labels. It's like there's some it's just plain, some that say "Made in Scotland," and that's a great, a really nice part of the story.
It's so nice. I mean, I'm not a destiny guy, but there almost seems like something destined in there, because for the stars to have aligned in that way, as to where Trakke was just not able to make it work because this business is really tough, and we'll chat about that in a second too, so they couldn't make it work. So for you guys to be in the UK, because I don't know how many bag brands are actually based in the UK,
not that many,
an infinite amount, right? No. And then also to be made in the UK, as to where you could transition that workload over, and your ability just to wing up to their factory and grab some of their gear and bring it back down.
Yeah.
I can see, I mean, I can see how it's a very an emotional situation for the founders and for the team, but to at least have seen the brand get this new chapter, get this new life. I know in the carry community, everybody's been so excited to see that Trakke just gets to live on. And you know, it's so exciting to see what that next chapter could potentially look like. And there's so many things that we could chat about, but I am curious about like this next chapter. Like, where do you see Trakke sort of going? Because like I put myself in your shoes and I'm like, okay, there's a couple ways we could take this. We can keep Trakke as sort of this heritage brand where we keep the designs and we don't, you know, hire new designs to try and reinvigorate it. Or we say that, hey, it's owned by Alpkit now and we're going to come out with new designs that are inspired by the Alpkit family. I mean, which path are we taking for the future of Trakke?
So I don't think that path has to be kind of exclusive. So I don't think we have to choose. So I think when I look at, I'm looking at the market and I'm thinking what people are using, what they want. I think often we're choosing bags for different things. So it's not like we're hooked on to say, I'm a thingy type of customer. So for my Trakke, it's really weird. Like if I'm going on, I suppose slightly less adventurous travel things, I kind of, you know, I've got, some of the Trakke, like the sort of, the Trakke bags. And there's an element there I go, but I want to go to the Alps. So I might spend, a night in Geneva or whatever, but actually then I'm going to go hiking or whatever. And that's so in tune with the Trakke heritage. You know, a lot of it was about, being used in the mountains and having that kind of sense of just that you can carry on that journey. But what they've built is a really strong kind of like look, aesthetic, the heritage and stuff. And they're a bit heavy, obviously with the primarily using Harley Stevenson's cotton, but they've also, and I think this is kind of, because they're so well known for that, it's almost forgotten some of their, like how they started, some of the fabrics that they're using. They've used, I mentioned polyant in a lot of the products, they've got, the Muir and stuff like that. So they've already been using those types of products. And if I just give you a flavor of what we're thinking, that, a lot of times, obviously there's this kind of like, what 1.5 travel, like, so how do I get a bag? And then, but what am I going to use when I get there? And then looking through the back catalogue, I'm going, they used to make this really simple roll top bag called the OG. So that's like one of the original bags from like 15 years ago. And I'm thinking, well, that's exactly the bag that I'm going to pack to then go on my little day trip and stuff. So there's bits like, super simple. It's lovely patterning, kind of like they've really got a lovely kind of pattern around it. This is like just literally like, I think second sample, like VX07. I can't remember. There's so many on there from the Dimension catalog, but like literally super simple roll top, really kind of simple. And when I kind of think things like that, I think they pay homage to the work that had been done previously. These are like simple backpacks. There's a kind of classic aesthetic to it, but actually then really in tune with how people are using bags at the moment and just all the problems of, there are some fantastic bags, but oh my God, they're heavy. I'm not going to go and use them on my next part of the journey. So if I think, again, this is obviously about Alpkit and Trakke, but I really love what Matador are doing in that kind of like outdoor travel space. Yeah. And, so the one thing that we picked up is in the kind of UK market, but also I think just in terms of brands that are really associated with travel. So not just luggage brands, just generally, it's quite a small cohort of brands that if I'm kind of, thinking about clothing for the future, kind of like, travel shirts and stuff like that, they're a little bit looking in the past. They're very kind of classic. And so we're definitely looking at that kind of like Trakke, such a brand that's associated with kind of, with travel, with adventure, which is so aligned with Alpkit, but something that we just would never do with Alpkit. So when we kind of, so it's that kind of spec. We've not really worked on the kind of development, but if someone was looking about where we think Trakke will go, is that we'll definitely look at slightly more kind of lighter, more technical equipment, but absolutely keeping some of these classic designs, because they are beautiful. You know, I mean, you've seen it with the band. You know, they're just so well to put together. We can't whitewash that. You know, they've got a real place in the market, and people are very passionate about it. But I can see them owning one of those and going, oh, I quite like that lighter weight version they've done and things. So I can definitely see how we can have essentially two paths, because they've already been treading it already with the use of, you know, other fabrics in products. And, you know, whether that's a lighter weight packing cube or whatever, they're already on that path. We're not reinventing that. The bit that I think they didn't have is essentially the clothing experience, which is very easy for us. We do every bit of technical outdoor, clothing that every other brand does, you know, in terms of down jackets, waterproof, all at a very technical level. But what we're scared of is that we can't turn Alpkit into a travel brand. But Trakke's so aligned with that side of it, we just think that's a natural extension. So, but very much on that kind of the technical side. So we're not just going to do, you know, it's not going to just be a cotton shirt with Trakke written on. It's like, what do we have? You know, I mean, yeah, you're in Hong Kong at the moment. Well, it's Hong Kong winter, so it's not. It's a little bit. It's more comfortable now. But oh my God,
sure.
you know, when you're traveling in, you know, 33-degree heat to a factory, and you know the humidity's high and stuff like that, the clothing you have really has to work. You know, if you want to wash it overnight because you've got a few days trip, we can see how that could really align with what Trakke has done in the past. It's just using the skills that I think Alpkit have got to bring it to market.
It's a really interesting sort of merging in that sense. And I don't want to use the word destiny, overuse it, but I mean, there seems to be a lot of synergy, right? And
Sure.
I thought that it was really interesting as you pulled down that roll top, as to where, you know, as a carry nerd, it was always just adored Trakke from a distance until recently, where I got to test their first bag. Like the fact that you're paying homage to their heritage, that you're, you know, keeping the core lineup, but also kind of looking in their archives and saying, this is
There's some amazing. I'm just going to go sideways.
Please.
All the way there. So they're all the original patterns. They're
No
beautiful.
shit.
They're so. I mean, I can't believe the amount of development they've done over the years, which is easy to forget when you just look at the website. You think, oh, they do so many. There's, 30, 40 styles that they've done, and they're all. You know, I look at them and go, oh my God! If you just take, you look at buckles or a particular fabric and say, if we just did it in this, that'd be amazing. And I think that just the quality of design that went into them at the beginning, all it needs is a little update. And that's, generally that's outdoor equipment anyway. Most of it is, we're not reinventing the wheel, but what we're doing in that moment in time, we're looking at, the partners that we have that to make it, what are the materials, what are the components, and that's then what suddenly makes it. And obviously, talking to consumers about how they're using it, to 2020, 2026 and not, 2019 or whatever. But sometimes little tweaks make such a difference. So I'm absolutely looking at the back catalogue of how we develop those, rather than just saying, I need to design a courier bag. They've designed a dozen courier bags, all amazing, but we just need to update it and, think about the materials and construction of today.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like what Trakke really may have needed, that's difficult and is very cash intensive, is that scale. And you guys can bring that to the table, as to where then you can test, different things, as to where it's not just like you have to pump out the same things, and it gives you a little bit of room for innovation. But Absolutely. At the end of the day, you're really paying respect to the design and the homage. And I'm curious, for Trakke, was that founder designed? Like, for instance, I run a backpack brand. I don't design shit, right? I outsource that. I monitor it very closely, right? But I don't know how to design. Was Alec, or I think you said James, were they the designers, or was that third party? How did this iconic heritage style of Trakke come to be?
I think within the team. So I think from I'm observer rather than actually knowing, but I know. The team had a lot of impact. So probably within Trakke, probably 2 or 3 people would have been able to, I've got an idea. Okay, so I wanted to do this. So that briefing stage, I would imagine a lot of that did come from Alec to go, this is the kind of bag I need. But I think it takes a team of people to look at, well, these are the components that could be used. This is if we do it like this, that's just going to be so painful. Can we look at the opening or the lid design, because it's just going to be so painful to make. So I think, but it was all within Trakke. They didn't, as far as I'm aware, they didn't outsource any of that design. And it's pretty kind of, when I look at the sophistication of the paneling and then I put together, they've done an amazing job at putting those bags together. There's a lot of work that goes in, because essentially they're 2 bags. They're almost fully lined. You're literally making one bag with the kind of pockets and stuff inside it, and then you're putting inside another bag and then binding it and fixing it. So there's a significant amount of work and paneling and construction methodology that goes into making one of those bags.
And based on my experience with the Bannock, and just watching from a distance, is just the taste that team has.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I've reviewed almost 1,000 bags at this point, Nick, and like I've seen a lot of brands do features, and I've seen a lot of brands do technicalities and specs, but the real test for me that really impresses me is what restraint and knowing when to say no and what to focus on. And this Bannock, when I looked at it, I was just like, the taste, the choices just across the board. I was just, it was so different. And there was such a warmth to it and this heritageness, but also getting like something cool, like a fucking Cobra buckle on there, They don't mind like taking a little bit of risk as well. Yeah. And that's what you got to do, because it's a competitive market out there, and business is tough. And like on that note, because I want to respect your time, I know we got to wrap up soon. Just on the note of business, we were chatting a little bit earlier because Alpkit had made some news recently, and I was wondering if we wanted to just kind of riff on this a little bit. I'd be curious to hear, because you guys are sort of reshuffling your business as well, so there's a lot happening in the world of Alpkit and Trakke. What's going on?
As I alluded to, I know exactly how Alec would have felt a year ago. So essentially, not necessarily making in the UK, but I think selling outdoor equipment, globally, really, is that we've got enormous price pressures going on in terms of labor. We have 200 people that we have with Alpkit, and if you take just the sort of labor rate, it's gone up, 50% over the last few years, from like 5 years ago. So it's a significant impact into a business, shared probably with like hospitality and stuff. It's such a big part of the costs of a business. Tariffs. Literally the day we bought Trakke, then we had the tariff situation coming in. Doesn't help, because depresses sales. Consumer confidence, certainly in the UK, but I think shared globally, is patchy. I wouldn't say it's like an all-time low. It's just that one month it's amazing, the other month it's not, which makes it really difficult to plan. And as I discussed, that kind of cash cycle where we're paying for products, deposits, where we might not then see realize the sales until September. So it's a huge pressure on any business. And the position that we found Alpkit in is we've supported those pressures historically by taking, we had like probably the largest amounts, like the COVID loans. So when COVID hit, I think a lot of companies were, how are we going to get through tomorrow, let alone a month away. And like most businesses, we took those loans out, but ultimately they can catch up with you. So our strategy was essentially, how do we make sure sales is really strong? And actually the sales have been, I think 16 year to date, kind of like up 16%. So like we're good, but our costs have just got crazy. That puts an impact on cash flow, and you get to a point where you go, this isn't going to work. And that day, as a owner, a founder, is very, you just have to have to be honest with yourself. You can't dress it up. And the longer that you essentially say, no, we can get through this, essentially makes your choices narrower and the choice worse. And I think we've always been very mature in the way that we've operated the company. We are very indebted to the team and what they do. So that makes those decisions actually quite easy, because we need to do something. We can't just do nothing and then find ourselves that we've just the company goes under and essentially it's all lost. So essentially we went through a process probably starting a few months ago. So we've had a lot of time to deal with this. but how do we find an investor into the company that can essentially value everything that we do with Alpkit, value what we do with Trakke, the UK manufacturing, what we do with the Alpkit Foundation, everything about that, and then essentially say, are we going to be in a stronger position? So the mechanisms for that can sound drastic, and in the UK we go through what's known as administration, where essentially the old company gets wound up and a new company starts, and that's through a kind of a new investor, and that again it's in some ways it's business as usual. We've not lost everything about it, but what was the old company that got wound up, but it's not in a way of I'm kind of very much focusing on the future. But I think that it took it was a few months to get to that process, and I think where I think a lot of other companies, when you hear about companies kind of closing, it's just you have to be really mature. You take that decision quite a bit earlier. So we were very lucky that we found a partner, but it was from the work that we did months ago. So we are arguably we're here. Absolutely, we're in a stronger financial situation than probably we've been for a few years. We're very much looking to the future, and one thing that we've tried to do, we've got crazy things like we were paying deposits for products that would be delivered. We may or may not deliver them. We've got a whole footwear program. Now, when you're thinking about the company closing, but you're actually paying another company a deposit for something, that takes quite a commitment, and we had to be very confident that we were going to deliver it. That's what we've done. So everything that we planned in 2026 is going ahead. So we can absolutely see new product development coming in Trakke. We've got other products coming in on the Alpkit side with a new footwear program. It's very much we're full steam ahead with product development.
The TLDR for anybody who's listening and just want so basically in essence what happened was the news was that you guys went into administration.
Yes, administration, right? Yeah.
Which is the equivalent to like bankruptcy.
Yeah,
but in essence, just like for instance, Western Rise. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Western Rise, Nick. Yeah. They're a U.S. traveling apparel company. They're a great, well-run business. They claimed bankruptcy about 2 years ago for debt restructuring. Right. Yeah. It is a way as a business to just restructure, start clean, and potentially to bring on a new investor like you guys have. Yeah. And it's interesting because you get to this point with scale and like with retail where, like you said, you got two paths in front of you. One is, keep this equity and as the owners and say, hey, we can figure this out, or say, hey, we maybe not need help, but a cash injection right now would ensure that our team is taken care of, our customers are taken care of. Yeah. We are basically as strong as we can possibly be moving forward. And that's not an easy decision for business owners to make. And I've listened to lots of podcasts about people who really thought that they could weather that storm by themselves. And then before they know it, they don't have that cash infusion and they have to order. So you guys doing that, I think, was a testament of doing what's right by your team. 200 people, I mean, in the UK. That is just, that's, I got a team of like 3.5, like it's, we do a lot of freelancers, but I can't even imagine what that balance sheet looks like on a monthly basis in terms of not only the gear that you have to buy and pay for up front with those cash cycles, but all the salaries and all the benefits that you're paying on top. It's a lot. So I think, right on you guys for doing what's best for the team and for the customers. Really keeping that in focus.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, I'm glad that we got that straightened out then. Nick, I said this is going to go 20 to 30 minutes. We're almost at an hour. I think you and I want to chat one time, though, about like the good old days of you going factory runs in China. Maybe we'll save that for part 2 at a later point in time.
Yeah, cool. It was when we talked about before, it's like memory. So, I can talk all day about that.
So awesome. Well, we'll say that for next time. Last word. Anything else that you wanted to plug or just clarify before we wrap up?
I can't think of anything. Sorry, I feel
I think we did a thorough job then. I'd say
we did.
So, all right. Well, Nick, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Anybody who's still listening to this, thank you again for tuning into the Nomads Nation podcast. If you want to hear more about the Trakke story or Nick's stories from the 90s being in Guangzhou factories, let us know in the comments below. We'll get him back on. Nick, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, take care.